How does corporate innovation differ from entrepreneurship? And what character traits do you need to be an intrapreneur versus being a company founder? And also, what makes big companies innovative? Listen to this episode to find out. Welcome to the Tech for Non-Techies podcast. I'm your host, tech entrepreneur, executive coach, and Chicago Booth MBA, Sophia Matveeva. My aim here is to help you have a great career in the digital age. In a time when even your coffee shop has an app, you simply have to speak tech. On this podcast, I share core technology concepts, help you relate them to business outcomes, and most importantly, share practical advice on what you can do to become a digital leader today. If you want to have a great career in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Hello, smart people. How are you today? This weekend, I went to the Science Museum in London. Have you been? It's really good. I hadn't been for ages, and what I saw is that it has been updated for the digital age, and there's a lot there about the internet and the advent of the smartphone, and it's quite fun. And also, there is a really clear explanation of what coding is and how it works from Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and he is the inventor of the World Wide Web. And obviously, it's a recorded video. Sir Tim is not just sitting there full time. The Science Museum was really interesting, and I was inspired by seeing so much human ingenuity under one roof. So when you are in London next, I highly recommend a visit. Okay, today we are going to cover another aspect of human ingenuity, and that is corporate innovation and how it differs from entrepreneurship. Because, we have this image that big companies, they're really boring, and startups, that's where all of the innovation happens. Startups are like the cool kids on the block. And entrepreneurship is really in vogue right now. But we forget that actually big companies can and do innovate spectacularly well. Not all do, and there is a lot of innovation theatre about. But, let's be real, not all startups do really interesting and innovative things either. And also, to be innovative and for these innovations to work, small companies and large companies need to collaborate together. So, for example, look at the Pfizer BioNTech COVID vaccine. We needed Pfizer, a huge company, to collaborate with a smaller, younger company in order to bring something about that actually, has really made the world a better place. This is why whatever side of this you're sitting on, so whether you're a founder, whether you're a corporate leader or an investor, understanding how corporates innovate is useful. And because I love you, I'm giving you a free excerpt of my excellent ebook called Innovate But How: The Pragmatist's Guide to Growth in Business and in Life. And you can get this for free in the show notes. This book is based on research that my company did with the help of the University of Chicago into how the largest companies in the world approach innovation. I think you'll find it interesting, you'll find it useful, and of course you will find it amusing because I wrote it. So it's not going to be boring, right? The link to the free excerpt is in the show notes, or just go to techfornontechies.co/innovation-guide. In today's episode, you are going to learn from Louis Gump. He is the former head of CNN Mobile and the former vice president of mobile at the Weather Channel. He is responsible for several innovations within both companies, which you'll hear about in this episode, and he is responsible for both the Weather Channel and CNN becoming two of the most visited mobile destinations in the US. That's quite impressive. So let's learn from Louis Gump. Hello, Louis Gump, and welcome to the Tech for Non-Techies podcast.
Hello, Sophia. It's great to be here.
When your PR contacted me, one of the topics that she said that you could discuss with me was intrapreneurship versus intrapreneurship, which basically I know is going to sound a bit fuzzy maybe to listeners. So basically one is with an I, the other one is with an E. And so this, from what I understand, is when corporate innovators are basically saying that they're entrepreneurial. And I know that in my audience, there are lots of entrepreneurial people who work in corporate. And I say this with the greatest love to them. But, my first love is always going to be founders. I myself am a founder. And, as a founder, when you have
people to pay and your clients have not yet paid you, or even worse, they have paid you, but the bank is holding your money, which has happened to me. And for some reason, you can't get it out because of some bank error. That is a hair-raising experience. And so when people say that they're entrepreneurs within a company, I always think, you know what? Unless you've had that experience, you don't get to have the name. So what are your thoughts?
Sure. So my first thought is that there's a lot of value to both. Entrepreneurship really is critical to innovation and value creation for the founder, the owner, the person who's driving and building. And also intrapreneurship is critically important. And some of the most important discoveries, especially ones that are brought to market at scale, come from larger organizations. So in an ideal world, and in our real world too, both add value and they're symbiotic. Now, there are benefits to having the security of a larger organization behind you, as you pointed out. And I've been there too. I've been CEO of two smaller companies. When that happens, you're responsible for everything. In a larger organization, you have people who are focused on HR and legal and marketing and other things, at least in my experience. And when that happens, it frees up an enterprising person to focus on building the business as opposed to some of the ancillary things. I distinctly remember as I was employee one of a very small company, and we grew it to make a bit of a dent. But I remember thinking, I don't know insurance. How do I get insurance? You have to do all those things. And so I find that intrapreneurship allows people to innovate and activate innovation within a larger organization. And entrepreneurship is incredibly important. And one of the more interesting findings from my book, too, is that some people are just made to be entrepreneurs. They're just, people who are going to lead a small company, and that's the way they roll. And there's some people who work a lot better inside a larger company, and that's fine, too. And then some people migrate between the two, depending on their stage in their career.
And would you say that you're the latter, the person who is migrating, because you've done both?
That's exactly right. And the migration, is something that I know a number of people who can relate to that, and it works really well for them. A lot of people become much better at entrepreneurship because they gain their skills at a big tech company, at a big health company, at a big CPG company, and they learn playbooks, they meet people, they learn industries, and then they bring expertise, and that expertise allows them to serve their customers better.
That's actually something that I covered on a recent-ish episode about unicorns. So there's a lady called Eileen Lee. She is a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. She's quite well known, and she is the person who coined the term unicorn. And she first coined it to just describe companies in the US, so young tech companies valued at over $1 billion. And so she researched the companies at the original unicorn list. And in 2013, there were 39. And in 2023, there were 519. So 14x growth. Pretty impressive. Anyway, so then she wanted to see, what are these companies doing? How have the companies changed? And also, who is leading them? And one of the things, the report is fascinating, and I did spend a couple of hours on a weekend morning going through it, but that's the kind of thing that I do. Maybe not for everybody. But one of the things that she found is that Google actually is the most popular former employer for the founders of unicorns. And I thought this was really interesting. I still haven't really worked out what I think about that, because it's a corporate. It hasn't been a startup for a long time, but yet they are famous for their 20% rule, which is where I think that intrapreneurship angle really gets to be exercised. And so
yes.
when you advising, I'm assuming you're advising companies on how to be more entrepreneurial, what is it that you would say to them?
Well, first of all, I'd love to see that report. So let's definitely trade notes after the discussion, because that illustrates a point that was proven in my interviews over and over again. And that is that people who learn in larger companies gain skills that are transferable to a variety of different situations. If I'm talking with people who are in a larger company, some people get to the place where they say, oh, wow, I really understand how to do this. I'm a serial intrapreneur, as opposed to a serial entrepreneur. I want to go do more of this. I like the resources of a larger company. I like supporting a larger brand. I like making that kind of impact in a marketplace that many entrepreneurs are able to do. But some people in those positions, either for a long time have had an itch to lead a smaller company, or, they get to a point where they feel like the larger organization is moving too slowly, which is another set of conversations, because some of the most innovative large companies understand this practice of entrepreneurship, and they create environments such as the ones that you were just referring to, where entrepreneurs can thrive. But when they want to do that, I have some questions along the lines of, well, okay, that's fine. Glad you want to do that. Are you ready to deal with a board of directors instead of a direct boss? I know you're getting frustrated with the seemingly glacial pace of decision-making in a larger company, but are you ready to be in an environment where there are fewer resources that are readily available? Are you ready to be the person who not only has the meeting with the really impressive VC, but the person who is vacuuming the carpet late on a Friday because there's nobody else to do it if you're having a meeting? And so those are the kinds of questions that I ask people. If they're interested, then in many cases, these entrepreneurs who have experience turn into tremendously successful entrepreneurs along the lines of the study you just referenced.
And could you give us some examples of interesting outcomes that large companies have had when they've innovated?
Sure. So an example that I'm familiar with, because I was part of it, was the growth of mobile within the Weather Channel. And, I was privileged to have a position there when weather.com for the desktop was really growing fast, but mobile still hadn't really come into its own. And a few of us took the position that mobile was going to be big someday. And we started trying things, and we built a generation of apps using older technologies that really aren't as prominent these days. And then we built mobile web, we built some video along the way. And then when the iPhone and Android apps came along, kind of the marketplace opened up, and it was just a tremendous period of growth. Another example, and one that many people can reference, some of us can remember when Amazon was a bookseller. And then Amazon turned into a company that sold a whole lot of things. And I would imagine that a lot of listeners to your podcast have a package that ends up on their door that has the Amazon logo on it from time to time. But then they got into other types of businesses, such as AWS. And when they did that with servers and hosting and whatnot, really, they just grew. And so then they have kind of a multifaceted portfolio. And to a large degree, the businesses are complementary to each other. Not always, but to a significant degree.
Another podcast guest, this was ages ago, I think 2 years ago now, Kapil Kane. He is the head of innovation in Intel in China. So, pretty big role. And he said that at first when he was setting up this innovation center, Intel China, pretty big company, right? And when he wanted to set up this innovation center, to essentially come up with new entrepreneurial ideas and also to teach engineers entrepreneurial skills, because, engineers like making things. They don't necessarily stop to think why we're making something, whereas the commercial people are always thinking about why we're making things, but they don't know how to make it. So for example, on this podcast, I'm trying to help the commercial people on the business side really understand the engineers, but engineers also have their own troubles. So anyway, he said that actually he ended up getting 3 years leeway from the CFO. So 3 years to essentially not be successful. It turns out that now the innovation center has brought, millions and millions of dollars in value, but for the first year, they were completely loss-making, which is what you would expect. But I'm wondering, in your opinion, Louis, is that normal? Is it normal that a CFO of a massive company is going to say, hey, have 3 years to try things out? Or is that just, is that pretty much a miracle?
Well, no, Sophia, I think that depends on your definition of normal. I don't know how common it is to have that perspective. However, if we think about people who have financial responsibility for companies, including CFOs and CEOs, from my experience, the most enlightened ones understand this, and it's quite common. And you can actually learn a little bit about the likely trajectory of a company based on a CEO or CFO or a CMO's perspective on this topic. And furthermore, many of the most talented and most successful senior C-level executives are ones who have been entrepreneurs in their past. And one of the findings of my book is that, when you look at why is entrepreneurship important, why is this feeding of growth businesses within larger organizations important? There are some obvious ones, such as, driving value creation within organizations beyond established businesses and whatnot. But there is one that was less obvious to me and emerged clearly as I spoke with many people on the topic, and that is that entrepreneurs train the next generation of leaders. The experience of intrapreneurship gives people the experience and the knowledge about what's valuable. And a lot of the people who do this grow into the people who are making the decisions later on. So going back to your question, I actually think it's not common enough. I don't know what the percentage is, but there are too many people who are too short-term focused. And there's also a paradox here. The more a company is facing some financial challenges, the more they need entrepreneurship. However, in my experience, both directly and also with people that I've gotten to know over time and worked with, the more they need entrepreneurship, they also may be tempted to cut back, to reduce the budgets for smaller growth businesses, to say, oh, we tried that innovation center thing. It didn't work for 2 years. So we're going to reduce funding by half or shut it down or whatnot, when they ought to be going exactly in the opposite direction. And so it's quite an interesting study when you look across different companies.
When you're speaking to a company that is thinking of cutting back their innovation spending because, they're worried about recession or they've just had some layoffs, what would you say to them?
So I would ask them what their rationale is for making cutbacks due to challenges in their business. In general, companies that don't have a structured and significant approach to innovation are at a competitive disadvantage, and they will increasingly be at a competitive disadvantage over time. And so if they don't approach innovation and creating new initiatives and types of businesses in one way, what other ways do they have? Are they going to approach it through partnership? I think that some companies can, for example, achieve significant growth simply through acquisition. However, and this was pointed out by Deborah Wilson in my book, who led the Weather Channel overall and the Weather Channel Interactive over a period of years, she said, hey, look, you can approach growth through acquisition, but then you introduce a lot of acquisition risks. And I think many of us who've been around the block once or twice recognize that not every single acquisition goes well either. And so my advice to them in general would be, if you want to succeed over the long term, you have to create a mechanism for driving innovation. You have to fund that approach to innovation, and you have to make sure that some of your best people who are already naturally inclined to excel at this type of work are assigned to that business unit or group.
And that whole question of build or buy, that's fundamentally a strategic decision that a company has to make, because this question has been around for years, whether, now we are in this generative AI hype. And so some companies are building their own large language models. Others are just partnering with what's already out there. And, others are yet ready to make acquisitions. Well, thank you so much, Louis, for joining me on the Tech for Non-Techies podcast. And so when people undoubtedly want to read the book, can you tell us what it's called and when it's coming out?
I'm happy to. The book is called The Inside Innovator, A Practical Guide to Intrapreneurship. It will be released in the U.S. on March the 12th. It will be released in Canada in late March, and it will be released in the UK in May. And we're really excited about this. It's been well received so far, and people can learn more at louisgump.com, LOUISGUMP.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Sophia. It's been a pleasure.
Wasn't that interesting? If you found this episode valuable, how about letting me know and leaving the show a rating and a review? It literally takes 30 seconds to do it on Apple or Spotify, and the world will reward you with good karma. Maybe you will leave the show a 5-star rating and then you will win the lottery. Or maybe you'll meet the love of your life as a result. I mean, it's possible, so you might as well find out. Okay, on that note, have a wonderful day, and I shall be back in your delightful smart ears next week. Ciao!